M2 multifamily, high density for the property situated in the city of Findlay via ordinance number 2021-094. Aforementioned to be rezoned from C2 general commercial to M2 multifamily high density. Would anybody wish to address council either for or against this issue? Hearing none, I will declare this hearing closed unless there's any comments from council. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Regular session of Findlay City Council. We will start with the roll call.
Mr. Greeno. Here.
Mr. Haas.
Mr. Hellman.
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer. Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Russell.
Here.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Here.
Mr. Slough. Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wilson.
Present.
Mr. Slough, let me know ahead of time that he's not going to be here this evening. He's out of town. I will entertain a motion to excuse Mr. Help.
So moved to excuse Mr. Slough.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none. And all those in favor of excusing Mr. Slough, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. He is excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yep. Mr. Russell, do we have any changes? Oh, I'm sorry. I will entertain a motion to accept the previous city council meeting minutes. Mr. Welch.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the previous city council meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-ons, replacements, or removals from tonight's agenda?
We have one add-on appropriations committee agenda report for the Blanchard River Water Shark Park Riverside project. Will be added on to the agenda.
Second, Mr. Schindeldecker. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the add-on, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It is added to tonight's agenda. We have no proclamations, recognition, oral communications, petitions, or written communications. Reports of municipal officers and departments.
Officer Shareholders Disclosure Form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for James G. Davidson, 208 East Sandusky Street, for D1, D2, and D3 liquor permits. Check for the record, show no criminal record for Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Welcher.
Make motion, no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Officer Shareholders Disclosure Form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Main Street Deli of Findlay LLC, first floor only for 513 and 515 South Main Street for a D1 liquor permit. Check for the record, show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Welcher.
Make a motion, no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it, so no objection will be filed.
Officer Shareholders Disclosure Form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Pizza Pie Investments LLC doing business as Biology Pizzeria, located at 1123 West Trenton Avenue, Patio, for a D5 liquor permit. Check for the record, show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Wilson.
Make a motion that there's no objection filed for biology.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion, Mr. Niemeyer.
Is this gonna be a transfer then from Main Street Deli? When Main Street Deli doesn't even have a liquor license yet?
It would have been in the paperwork that you
On the
provided.
on the second page of this,
The first one they're renewing, and then the second they're transferring.
Looks like the first, according to the clerk, the first one is that they're renewing, and the second one is they're transferring. Any further, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the no objection to be filed, say aye. Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Officer Shareholders Disclosure Form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Cracker Barrel Old Country Store Incorporated, doing business as Cracker Barrel Store 68, located at 1031 Interstate Court, for a D5I liquor permit. Check for the record, show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Wilson.
Make a motion that no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for September 2021.
Questions or comments? Letter report to be filed.
Findlay Police Departmental Activities Report for September 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department Activities Report for September 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for September 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Precipitation and Reservoir Levels Report for third quarter 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Planning Agenda for October 14th, 2021, as well as the minutes of September 9th, 2021.
Questions or comments? Agenda and minutes to be filed.
Treasurer's Reconciliation Report for September 30th, 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Summary financial reports as of September 30th, 2021.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from President Pro Tem Russell regarding an ad hoc committee for the 2022-2023 Council Committee Assignments and Rules of Procedure Review.
Entertain a motion to approve. Mr. Wilson?
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
Mr. Reno, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the appointment say aye. Any opposed, nay. The appointments are approved.
Letter from City Engineer Cal regarding the 5th Capital Improvement Appropriation of 2021.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Cal regarding the Bittersweet Drive and Blue Bonnet Drive Sanitary Sewer Project number 356-01200.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wilson?
Chairman, on this one, it looks like we're being forced, not forced, but we have to go in different direction with this project because of what the county engineer is having us do. Was there no better option for us than to have to spend an additional $77,000?
Since that's kind of in their jurisdiction with the township and the county, you know, I did meet with them and voice my opinion where I would prefer to have it in the long run, which would be on the edge of the road. With talking with them and kind of finally coming to an agreement, they suggested to put it in the middle of the road for ease of maintenance for them and stuff with long-term for the roadway, which does in return give us more stone backfill than what we originally planned as part of the project. Working with the contractor, we were using crushed concrete as an option to save as much cost as we can due to the move on that, and we try to cut back on as much as we can on making our trench width as wide or as skinny as possible type thing. But working with them, since it is ultimately their jurisdiction, that's where they suggest.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Cal regarding sidewalk insurance bond.
Questions or comments? Mr. Hellman?
This is, the way I read this is we're gonna pay $570 to rectify a situation the contractor didn't do properly. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this was a residential drive that was poured by a licensed contractor through us. They had permits, everything. Our inspectors that inspected it found out that the sidewalk going through there was not to our specifications and not meet the ADA code. Tried to reach the contractor a couple times, got a hold of them, let them know about the deficiencies, and then after kind of numerous calls, didn't receive anything back. Kind of notified them that if nothing is done with this, because we need to get it up to our code, that we will be exercising and pulling the bond, their insurance bond for them, which will cover the cost for our street department to fix it properly. So they were notified. We have, I believe the auditor's office has received a check for that, so this would just be putting the money into the street department so that they can get that fixed this year.
Thank you for that explanation. I just didn't want to send a a signal to other contractors, they can come in and not have things boarding to go to take care of. As long as we've got that bond, that's fine.
Yeah, it's pulling bonds, so I know that's not a fun process on their end, so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's the immediate decision on that part. Any other further questions? Letter to be filed.
Income tax board minutes of October 11th, 2021.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding the IAFF contract renewal for 2022 to 2024 for 3 years.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding the OPBA Findlay Police Department contract renewal for the 2022 to 2024 for 3 years.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser?
Rob, on both of these contracts in your letter, we're obviously not at a point where we can discuss the details of this without being in executive session. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's why we're going to call for executive session when this is done.
Correct.
To go over that. Very good. Nope, that's all I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Committee reports.
The Water and Sewer Committee met on October 4th, 2021 to discuss water regulations. We recommend no action needed by council.
I will entertain a motion to accept the committee report. Mr. Greeno. Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is accepted.
The Streets, Sidewalks, and Parking Committee met on October 5th, 2021 to continue to September 7th, 2021 discussions on carriage and service walks. We recommend to take out the carriage walks when disrupted by construction in the right-of-way, no matter if parking is allowed or not, because of Americans with Disabilities Act.
Mr. Russell.
So do we want to have the long discussion about this issue now, or do we want to wait until there's legislation? I mean, I guess, Don, where would you like to have all the explanation of this and why this is even an issue for us, and answer all the questions that I'm receiving and we're receiving on this issue? Because I guess we could vote down the committee report and the issue dies, or we could have legislation and then do it during a third reading.
That's up to you. It's not my.
That's my legal.
At this point in time, the matter at hand is the committee report. I think you as council have to decide one or the other, the two scenarios that you presented, or a third scenario if anybody else could think about it. The mayor had something to say.
I guess I was just going to ask for clarification from Councilman Russell, just, I guess, so that we are aware of kind of next steps. Is this something that you are opposed to, or you just need more communication to the public on why we're making this decision?
I haven't made a decision on it yet. I think the whole issue is government bureaucracy run amok, and that where the whatever hits the fan is here in the city of Findlay and all these other municipalities that have to deal with the practical realities of ADA interpretation. And the end result is, as we heard from the one citizen a few months ago, is something that has existed for decades upon decades, well before the American Disabilities Act, and has never caused any issue, is now considered outlawed, and for silly reasons. And that under the guise of us protecting ourselves from potential liability under ADA, we run scared and go along with it. And so it's a question that council ultimately has to weigh. Do you want to take on the liability of or risk of this, or do you want to say enough is enough?
So
And the way we do that is we have a committee report, and so we can say, well, we reject the committee report, and if you want to have legislation for this, find 2 council reps to create legislation, or you can do so. Or we can accept the committee report, create legislation, and then have the conversation at a later time. And I'm you know, part of it is does council want to have the conversation now, or do you want to wait for, or run it through the legislation process? And so that's kind of why I'm really openly asking the question, and I asked the law director for his guidance on how he suggested we do that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of the council members probably aren't prepared to have a conversation of that depth and finality at the reading of the committee report, because we traditionally just approve committee reports and go to legislation. But I raised the question to council via a question to the law director so that council can weigh in.
Yeah, so I appreciate that clarification. I guess my statement would be that we've had, I believe, 2 or 3 committee meetings on this topic to get to the point where this committee, whose responsibility it is to make recommendations to council on this topic, is now making their recommendation. So I guess my opinion is we've been having this conversation in those meetings, and if council would like to address it in a different manner, I think at this point they're saying that they not be touched when we are, you know, they'd be removed moving forward. And if we'd like to address it in a different manner, then we can look at legislation. But I think we're going to just reiterate the conversations that we already had about why this is the recommendation that they've come to.
And at some point, the committee has to then explain why they make the recommendation. The information I've gathered has not been from committee reports. It's been from conversations I have directly with the law director and the city engineer. So that's where I'm getting my information. I don't know what the rest of council has done on this issue. But I think that this is something that warrants, I personally think it warrants conversation. And it's the question is to council, is there somebody who's going to recommend approval of the committee report, and then we go forward, or does it die here?
Okay, thank you for your clarification.
Mr. Webster.
I tend to agree with Councilman Russell on this. I've not heard much about this situation except little bits and pieces here and there. I guess I'd be interested in as to why we came to this conclusion. The committee report wasn't very illuminative in that situation, except for the fact that because of ADA. So I guess I'm looking for some additional information on this too.
Mayor?
I would have appreciated if you all could have attended the meetings where this was discussed at length, because I think that's exactly why we publicize what's on the agenda for those meetings to occur. In short, the conversations have been, and Jeremy and Rob and the law director, feel free to jump in. So when we are doing construction projects and going through neighborhoods, especially historical neighborhoods where the carriage walks, which is the I'll say perpendicular sidewalk between the primary sidewalk and the roadway, is in place. What we have found is that it creates, it is a violation of the American with Disabilities Act, because someone could come off of the main sidewalk, come on that sidewalk, and potentially go directly into the flow of traffic. Now, we did look and say, okay, could we keep it where there is traffic where there is a parking lane between the sidewalk, the carriage walk, there's a parking lane, so that someone isn't going directly into the flow of traffic when they step out. So that was a discussion point as a potential option, and ultimately it was the feeling of both the committee and the law director that still is an area of concern. So we recognize that this is something that people have become accustomed to, and is something that is of benefit if they are parking on that roadway. But ultimately, because it is a violation of federal law and we have concerns around it, when we're coming in and doing constructions, rather than being responsible for putting it back in, we do not believe that's the city's responsibility. If someone would like to put it back in, then that would be their responsibility to do it from the sidewalk to the roadway, to be able to replace that at their own expense. Rob or Jeremy or Don, did I kind of encapsulate it pretty quickly?
Jeremy.
So kind of going on top of that, kind of what the committee came up with, or kind of what we suggested to them, was to eliminate them completely because, like the mayor was saying, these are pretty much would be classified as a mid-block crossing, where mid-block crossings, they have to be in certain areas, certain signage, and all that kind of stuff has to be with it. So if you have these carriage walks that are come out, these are in ADA terms a mid-block crossing that would not be per code or anything like that. As we're going through construction, nothing, I mean, stuff can be grandfathered in, but as soon as we touch something, we have to make sure it's up for code. So that's why curb ramps, as we go through and resurface roads, that's why every single curb ramp we have to bring up to code, even if it's not up to code. So as soon as we touch something, that's what kicks in all that kind of stuff. So as we're going through and removing curb and replacing that, we take about 2.5 to 3 feet behind the curb to get our curb machine through. As we're doing that, that's going to affect all those carriage walks down through there. So then this is where it's coming into the point. We're touching those. How do we put them back with ADA? Do we put them back in size-wise for ADA? Do we put them back in, you know, we have to follow slopes and all that kind of stuff, but then that all kind of falls back into these are technically mid-block crossings, where, as you know, on my job when we go to streets and stuff, I need to make sure everything's per specs, safe for everyone. As we're going through there, you know, ADA, it is a big conversation with stuff. That is something that we make sure on all our jobs we follow that. It's not the, most of the time with sidewalks and stuff, it's not the shortest route and the most convenient route, it's the safest route that we have to get people through there. So that's why you see in some areas with crosswalks and stuff that we only have 3 light crossings, because if we added in that 4th way for the 4-way intersection, that's not very safe because of visibility and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there's, you know, kind of building off that, there's times that it's not the shortest route. Yes, I understand that's easy for people to get to their house and go from a parked car up, but that's not technically the safest route on our end. And like the mayor was saying, you know, we feel if you have shown this mid-block crossing, an able-bodied person could be using that, because it looks like a mid-block crossing. They could step out right into the line of traffic when the cars are not expecting someone to go through there. So what we suggested and kind of came up through there and talking with the law director is that we remove them completely. So that way we don't have to worry about having any of those come in there. We did kick around the idea of possibly coming up with some kind of a permit that would push the liability off on the homeowner, but really it's within our right of way. I would feel safer in our end, even though it is within the right area, like it's in the right of way, it's still kind of our responsibility in the long run. So to make everything easier, just be completely remove them all and don't allow them back in.
Mr. Russell?
Jeremy and Mayor, I'm not asking you to try to defend the ADA and its interpretations or make sense of federal government regulation. But, I mean, I would pose the same rhetorical question that I asked you before the meeting. If a carriage walk is a potential mid-block crossing, then what is a driveway or the apron of the driveway from the sidewalk to the street? It has the same open invitation to cross the street. And if you don't believe so, walk down or watch people walk down Main Street and where they cross the street. And then in addition, the solution to make people safer is to have them exit their car from their street parking and then walk in the street until they can go down to the end of the block and find a sidewalk. I mean, we know that's the silliness of this is the devil's in the details of implementing the ADA at this level, and it's not something that I'm asking you to defend, but that's the practical challenge that I'm faced with, is that the solution is just so above and beyond. And then, but lastly, a real quick clarification, because I heard 2 different things from the mayor and from you, Jeremy. The mayor said, hey, if the citizen, if the homeowner wants to reestablish it and put it in after we take it out, they may do so at their expense. And I heard you say, no, they can't, because that's really our you know, that's municipal land, and so that would be building, you know, unapproved, like building in that area. Is that, so could I reestablish my carriage walk that would be removed, or could I not?
So that was kind of our first way we were gonna look at it, is see if we can remove those, and then, like I said, have a form that the homeowner or property owner would sign off on. After further talks with the law director, he suggested as well, since, like I said, it's within our right of way, even though we're signing off liability from the, with the homeowner, is to just completely remove them out and not allow any of them in. So it would be pretty much remove them all and do not allow any, even with a liability paper signed.
Mr. Russell?
And then, so are we planning to retroactively go remove carriage walks under the banner of safety and ADA throughout the city, or will the other ones be grandfathered? And if they are grandfathered, then why aren't under the banner of safety, wouldn't we retroactively remove them?
So we're going back to, like I was saying about the curb ramps, is we will not rectify them or change them until we have to touch them with construction. So same way as curb ramps, once I go in through there for resurfacing, I have to make sure the curb ramps are ADA. So we would not be going through streets and removing these. It would only be as we go through and resurface the road. So if we have to remove them as part of the curb process, then that's when we would not replace them. It wouldn't be just going out there and actively removing them.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
I'm curious as to where responsibility begins and where it ends. The area you're talking about between the sidewalk and the curb is city property, I understand that. But I'm expected to keep the lawn mowed in that area, and if I would let the grass grow to 10 feet tall, I think I would probably be cited in one way or another for not doing what I'm expected to do. Where does my responsibility as far as the grass is concerned, and your responsibility as far as the carriage walks begin and end? I'm just a little confused.
So it kind of goes back to the same thing, where once we touch it, we were the city was the ones that touched that carriage walk. We were the ones that would, if it was a normal sidewalk, be responsible to replace that. And when we go to replace that, we have to make sure it's ADA. So this is where it kind of plays into us, because we are the ones who removed it, and we got to figure out what process are we going to go to replace it. Are we going to put it back as grass, or are we going to put it back as concrete? So it kind of kicks into that thing where once I touch it, I got to fix it correctly. It wouldn't be any different than if the gas company went down and tore out a whole bunch of sidewalk that was actually residential. When they put it back, they have to put it back per ADA. And that's what all our permits and stuff are for. So, we wouldn't be going out and doing this before the construction projects. But as soon as I touch it on the city side, we have to make sure we replace that stuff.
Mayor?
Councilman Schindeldecker, that's a great question. And as I was sitting there trying to think of how we can help folks understand, there are certain services that you as a citizen are unable to provide for yourself. If we said, hey, you're responsible for maintaining the street area in front of your house, or all of the water and sewer system that you receive water through, or the gas lines that are coming to your house, you don't have the expertise, the ability to maintain that infrastructure. You have entrusted the city of Findlay and your utility companies to provide that service on your behalf by paying us your taxes or your monthly bill. And therefore, we have that responsibility to make sure that it is safe and well maintained for you. You, on the other hand, are responsible for your plot of land that we have put to you, and there is a reasonable expectation of you maintaining that property as a good citizen. And so there certainly are areas that we intervene and help make sure that it's maintained for the benefit of the community. But in this situation, because our safety is, our responsibility is the infrastructure and maintaining it, yes, it may not necessarily make sense, but I'm, as we had the conversations, and I certainly would be appreciative of Councilman Greeno, Hawes, or Niemeyer chiming in on this topic, because I know you guys sat through a number of meetings on how we reach this outcome. Yes, you know what? government bureaucracy is not fun, and we would be happy to just let it go about. But I think it's important to recognize that the carriage walks, our primary concern is folks coming off of the sidewalk into the roadway, not off of the road where they have chosen to park, knowing that they're going to have to get out of their vehicle and then which they can safely traverse onto the sidewalk rather than flowing into traffic. Additionally, driveways, yes, people use them as pedestrian access, but they're for vehicular traffic. So I know it's not ideal. That's why we've taken 2, 3, 6 months to discuss and look at what our legal options are. But ultimately, the recommendation that the committee has put forward is the recommendation of the engineer, the law director, and the administration, because we've vetted them. And though it may not be ideal, it's what we believe is in the best interest of the city, and ultimately in compliance both for the property owners and the city of Findlay.
Mr. Wobser.
Mayor, in the city, who is responsible for the upkeep of sidewalks?
So property owners are responsible for the sidewalk within their area.
So this wouldn't fall under that same situation?
If it is simply being maintained, however, again, as Jeremy said, once we have, so we restore, if we disturb, we restore folks' sidewalks to a better condition typically, but to the standard condition. But because we are now providing a service within that area that is, again, that's our right-of-way, and the reason that it's within our right-of-way is because that's where our utilities, which are the public service, are located. And so that is why then we're disturbing it. It's now our responsibility to make sure it's kept to the code which we fall under.
Mr. Russell?
Is there a estimate of the financial liability that carriage walks and/or the construction of illegal carriage walks after the curbs have been touched? What kind of financial liability that exposes the city to?
To my knowledge, we have not vetted that process. Oh, you have a dollar amount in mind? Jeremy's got a dollar amount in mind.
I mean, and from conversations, Jeremy, I understand the example you provided about, I don't know if it was Fremont or Sandusky or wherever. I understand that. I just wondered if there's like a true dollar amount of that liability, because at some point in time, we're asking to say no to this. The council is basically saying we will take risk on, we're going to accept financial risk on this issue. And so I'm just trying to get a ballpark as to what that financial risk is.
So for the liability, I don't know if I have an exact cost on what the liability would be for that. You could come up with, for injuries or all that type, for us, just construction-wise, it's only probably $300 to say $400, depending on the size of the right-of-way and all that kind of stuff. It's more in what I'm talking about liability-wise is, say if we ever, come into that case, then with ADA and stuff and kind of case studies that can be shown in other cities, other states and stuff like that, what happens is Department of Justice comes in and they look at your capital budget and they say, okay, you guys have this much money that you're spending every year. 5% of that for the next 10 years is going to be used to do ADA upgrades. So, I just don't ever want to get in that position. It's not very common that happens, but it has happened in multiple areas across this state, Ohio, and other states as well.
Okay. Mr. Russell?
I think that there's more more conversation to be had on this topic, and yet I don't believe that tonight is the night to make a final decision. Therefore, I think it's probably better that we approve the committee report and legislation be created. We'll have plenty of time to hear from our constituents on the issue, and then come third reading, have the conversations. And in the meantime, further conversations can be had with the law director and Mayor Safety Service Director and the city engineer on it, and you can gather more information. And for that reason, I would move that the committee report be accepted.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Rasmussen. We might have not done this properly.
Grant, I respect your opinion, and I think it's something that we need to look at, but we also don't want to put anybody at risk, obviously. And we do not want to be spending a whole bunch of time fighting ADA cases either. So, you know, there's a cost there as well.
Mr. Wobser?
Will there actually be legislation put together for this?
But obviously legislation takes just two council people or the administration.
Okay, so that's
to-
what you're counting on, Councilman Russell?
Well, that's actually a really good question. Will there be, where does this recommendation go?
Just an administrative review, looking at it, right? So you've got, well, I don't know if you want to have a committee of the whole on the issue. You want to have
No.
additional
Wants a strong
discussion
word.
about it. But again, I think to comply, we're going to have to do that. And as long as your property stays the way it is and it's compliant, it's fine. But moving forward, I see real issues.
Okay. So currently we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
I'm going to do a roll call, please.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas. Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Nay.
Mr. Russell.
Nay.
Mr. Schindeldecker. Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Nay.
4 nays. 4 nays out of 9.
So it is 5-4.
Does that mean we don't accept the committee report? Or?
It's a simple majority except for the committee report. All right, the committee report is accepted. I'm sorry, the committee report is accepted, 5-4. Okay, let's move on.
The Street, Sidewalks, and Parking Committee met on October 5th, 2021 to continue September 7th, 2021 discussions on Boulevard right-of-way use. We recommend to table Boulevard right-of-way use due to lack of information.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to accept.
second Mr. Niemeyer, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. Committee report is accepted.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on October 11th and 12th, 2021 to review requests for proposals presentations. We recommend to continue the selection process to choose a consultant to assist in the strategic planning process. Next meeting is Tuesday, October 19th, 2021.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to accept committee report.
second Mr. Hellman, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is accepted.
The Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom is referred a request from Keith Tennant to vacate the east-west alley between Lot 149 and 150 in the Country Club Acres Second Edition from Londonderry Drive to the east dead end. We recommend approval as requested.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to approve committee report. Excuse me.
second Mr. Palmer, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is accepted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Van Horn Hoover and Associates Incorporated on behalf of property owner Tella Incorporated and Terrence Connor to rezone the area consisting of 208 feet plus or minus east of Park Street and the 460 feet north of Oakland Avenue from I-1 light industrial to R4 duplex triplex high density. We recommend approval as requested.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to approve committee report.
second Mr. Schindeldecker, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
We don't do
No,
Oh, I'm
just-
sorry. All- back up a second, I'm sorry. Motion, the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion is approved. I'm sorry, the committee report is approved.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Brian Buck on behalf of his father, William Buck, to rezone Madison Avenue Lot 6192, 6193, 6194 from R3 Single Family High Density to C1 Local Commercial District. This request was previously discussed during the May 13th, 2021, June 10th, 2021, August 12th, 2021, and September 9, 2021 Planning and Zoning Committee meetings where it was tabled. The request remains tabled. No action was taken.
Mr. Russell?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but during add-ons and all, I should have asked that this committee report be removed from the agenda. There was no recommendation. It wasn't filled out. We didn't discuss it. There's no committee report on this item, so I don't think we should take any action on it. I'd actually move, if we can, at this point in time, that this be removed from the agenda.
We have a motion to remove it from tonight's agenda. Second, Mr. Wobser. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of removing this item from tonight's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It will be removed.
The Appropriations Committee, to whom was referred a request to discuss the BRWP Riverside Dam project. We recommend the approval of the project. We also request the auditor update the revenue certificate to allow use of funds in this project.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to approve committee report.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Mr. Russell?
Could we get from somebody on the committee a discussion or a little bit of conversation about what the project is, what the recommendation is, et cetera?
Mr. Wobser?
I'll take this on, and I'm sure the mayor can fill in some additional color. This is just getting this process started. It's actually a second step in this process. For those who've been around for a while, in 2016, we approved money to get this EPA testing done to essentially clean out the Blanchard River from the dam back up river and clear out all the sediment there. And that also, ultimately, this would include some work on the dam to open up some throughways on it to allow for fish migration and sediment to continue on down the river and would stop or slow the sediment buildup behind the dam. So there's a couple things going on here. This simply gets us to the next step in the process. Allows us to do the next study and in conjunction with the county. And if this was ultimately to be approved and the grants were accepted, it'd be a project that could be anywhere from $1 million to $2 million.
Ms. Mayor?
So the committee met to review this and recommend an appropriation be made. There will be legislation brought forward requesting $80,000 be granted towards Blanchard River Watershed Partnership, and we'll work out the details on how the entity and the dollars need to flow. And then we've been in communication. The county has not put funds yet towards this. However, they are also discussing putting some funding towards the project. And as Councilman Wobser said, it would be helping fund pre-construction, engineering, and then that will make it grant ready, because many grants do not cover kind of the engineering and study phase, but just the construction phase.
One other thing I would add was that we can use ARPA dollars for this part of the project.
Correct, and that is why the documentation would need to be changed through the auditor's office to allow it for use of the ARPA dollars.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is accepted. Legislation, we have no resolutions. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2021-92, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to waive tap fees for the Blue Bonnet Drive and Bittersweet Drive Sanitary Sewer, project number 356-01200, for 5 years after the project completion and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for approval of ordinance number 2021-092.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Aye. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2021-94, an ordinance amending chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property, referred to as the Findlay Commerce Park Technology Drive rezone, which previously was zoned C2 General Commercial to M2 Multifamily High Density.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve 2021-94.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2021-97, an ordinance amending certain provisions of codified ordinance number 2020-121 of the city of Findlay, Ohio, known as the salary ordinance, to add the new holiday known as Juneteenth, effective on or before January 1st, 2022, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2021-98, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2021-99, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for various projects, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2021-100, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2021-101, an ordinance appropriating funds, transferring funds, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
So this is the sidewalk insurance bond that city engineer mentioned, and because we have received the bond money, this ordinance is simply moving it from one account to another so that we can actually go perform the work. I think there's a desire to get this done before the snow flies, and not that I'm implying that snow is going to fly anytime soon. And for those reasons, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2021-101 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye. Aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
The rules of council has been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2021-101, ordinance 2021-101.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve 2021-101.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2021-102, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract with Scott Basinger to continue to provide legal services of filing garnishments on behalf of the city of Findlay Income Tax Department in Findlay Municipal Court and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2021-103, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a 3-year contract with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 381, AFL-CIO, effective January 1, 2022, expiring December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2021-104, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a 3-year contract with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association on behalf of the Division of Dispatch Patrol Officers, Sergeants, and Lieutenants in the Findlay, Ohio Police Department, effective January 1st, 2022, and expiring December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2021-105, an ordinance vacating a certain portion of a certain road right-of-way, hereinafter referred to as the Londonderry Drive vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio. First reading for ordinance 2021-106, an ordinance amending chapter 1100 at SEC of codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property referred to as the Tella Incorporated Park Street and Oakland Avenue rezone, which previously was zoned I-1 light industrial to R4 duplex triplex high density.
Old business. Mayor.
I would actually like to request that ordinance 2021-098 be reconsidered and potentially be given its third reading. This is the legislation to allow additional funds to be appropriated to the city income tax department. As you may recall, we previously discussed how we are going through and trying to clean up our old rolls, and with that, we have had an increased expense associated with filing claims, garnishments, etc. And the way that those now work, we previously would pay the court costs out of the revenues received. However, now we have to receive the revenue and then pay them out of a separate line item. And that line item is dwindling very quickly. So to continue to have that process move forward, we would request that additional funds be appropriated to that account to offset that expense line item.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion that ordinance 2021-098 be reconsidered.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of the ordinance being reconsidered, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
and Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance will be reconsidered. Mr. Wobser.
I'd make a motion that council's statutory rules be suspended and this legislation be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its 2021-098 its third reading.
Ordinance 2021-098.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve 2021-098.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Schindeldecker,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted. Any additional old business? Mr. Wobser.
Jeremy, could you give us an update, please, on the Martin Luther King Parkway expansion upwards?
Yeah, so since last council, we've actually received some good news, and we received our traffic poles. And with that, kudos to our contractor and also the subcontractor. As soon as we found out we had poles, they were actually able to show up on the job a couple days later. So kudos to them for kind of moving their schedule around to make sure we can get that open. So with that being said, right now, the way we're looking, I would say I'm hoping the first week in November we can get open, but it could possibly be into the second week in November. We had some problems with unknown gas lines that were in the area that is kind of setting us back a couple days, and it's actually where one of the traffic poles had to go. So once we put in the foundations for the poles, we actually have to let them set for 7 to 10 days before we can actually put the poles on top. So there's one pole that we've been having a lot of problems with getting that in there. Yesterday we did find kind of a solution for that. So we'll be moving along. Next week they're going to be putting pavement down. They'll be doing pavement markings and stuff like that. So as soon as we can get that road open with traffic poles and fully under, we'll get it open. We might have some work on the side that we'll be doing to kind of finish up the project, but our main goal right now is to get that road open to full traffic.
I'm not going to remind you, Jeremy, that you promised me that'd be done in September. but I understand the polls weren't there, so it's
Just
all.
I was just off a couple weeks.
No, that's all good news. I appreciate the update.
Under old business, I'd like to thank whoever was responsible for improving our sound quality. I know that was, but seems to be tonight, it's not a problem. New business. Ms. Mayor.
Just a couple of quick items. First of all, the computer services team is the one that has helped get this all functioning. So kudos to them, and we'll keep tweaking it as we have issues. Just a couple of quick notes. The City Planning Commission is trying to get a hold of Mr. Buck so that we can hopefully get that item removed one way or the other. So we will try to work on that. Any council member who would like to discuss the boulevards, feel free to reach out. We can share all of the information that was shared with the committee and try to make some recommendations on potential other solutions. But at this point, I think you did the right thing by adopting the report. I would like to request that a water and sewer committee be called. And you don't need to determine a date tonight unless you would really like to. But as you all probably saw, at the same time, we were pretty much notified that the state awarded us $600,000 approximately from the H2 Ohio program for the Spring Lake subdivision project. So we will be coming, we would like to discuss an update on that project. That was not a grant we actually applied for. They just wanted to show their commitment to the project. So they went ahead and said, here's the money, and then we'll get you a grant agreement to enter into. So we will have legislation at the next meeting to enter into a grant agreement with them to be able to receive those funds. That is for the construction cost of the rebuild of the pump station and kind of getting that project underway as previously discussed. So we would like to have a water and sewer committee meeting to discuss that project and move forward. I think that's it.
Mr. Russell?
Yeah. I saw those grant, the information about the grants. I know we made some application for some grants for water projects. Did we not get those, or is that still?
Those have not yet been released.
Not been released.
That is a different pool of funds.
Awesome. Do we have an idea of when
We're supposed to, anytime,
Anytime.
any day.
Fantastic.
We will, as soon as we know one way or the other, we will let you all know.
Well, so I was prematurely disappointed.
Yes, don't be disappointed yet.
I was happy to see you on the spring day. Thank you.
Yep.
That's happened before.
Any other new business? I will entertain a motion that the council members adjourn into executive session. Mr. Russell.
Yes, for the purpose of discussing contracts, I would make a motion, contracts and concerning Ordinance 2021-103 and 2021-104. I would move that council adjourn into executive session.
With no further business when we
With
adjourn.
no further business when we return.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, okay, the mayor's got discussion. I'm sorry, I think a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned into executive session.